Hello everyone, today is sort of a double feature video. Originally, this started as kind of like a love letter to Quicksilver Storm, but then kind of derailed into something that I think is a bit of a concern in the game today, and could be potentially why you might be struggling in certain bits of content. So first, why do I like Quicksilver Storm so much? Well, I think there are multiple factors. Number one is obviously damage. Quicksilver Storm puts out a good amount of primary weapon damage on targets, but it also has had 2 seasons worth of perks to help it along the way within the season artifact. This season featuring what is essentially non-stop unraveling rounds. Exotic primary weapons currently get a 40% damage increase versus red bar enemies over their legendary counterparts, and this was to encourage their use a bit more, since at the time this change was made, exotic primary weapons were not considered very good, and special and heavy weapons kind of ruled the world, with exotics anyway. Nowadays, I'd say exotic primary weapons are among the better options because we have access to a lot of good specials and a good amount of machine guns, although a lot of the top tier ones come from things like raids or dungeons, which can be prohibitive to some people. Number 2 is utility. If there is ever a gun in the game that is not only capable of doing multiple things at the same time, but doing it very well, it's certainly going to be a very good weapon. Quicksilver Storm is not only a solid primary weapon, but also converts into a heavy weapon in less than 1 magazine's worth of shooting. You guys, since Lightfall, have heard me discuss how machine guns are super good, and you basically shouldn't use anything else unless you're in a really specific situation, raid DPS, boss DPS, whatever. But there is one gun that I will use more often than a machine gun when I have it equipped, and that's Quicksilver Storm. You can dig through my archive for the Season 20 GMs that I did with Jez and Danielle. I have Quicksilver Storm out most of the time because my entire goal is to get 3 grenades in the chamber ready to go to deal big damage. Quicksilver Storm is essentially 2 weapons in one. It's a primary and it's a special or a heavy, depending on what you're doing. The grenade launcher deals crazy damage. I'm talking, put it on a thumbnail with an arrow, red circle, big font that says insane. It's capable of chunking down champions very reliably. On Legend, you can probably get a champion to finisher range with 3 grenades and maybe a little bit of primary fire. But the reason it's such a big deal is that it is free. These grenades are free. There is no ammo cost, and they are incredibly common to generate. You are essentially given a 4th weapon with this gun in your hands, which, by the way, has unlimited ammo because it's a primary. Are you out of ammo on your other guns? Who cares? Who cares? The catalyst also makes your grenades produce tangles on kills, which for Titan is just the easiest decision in the world to make. For Warlocks makes things more viable with their new aspect, and for Hunter, now, something else you could also do is not put in the catalyst to retain even more damage on the weapon, since kinetic weapons deal more damage than non-kinetics, to make up for the fact they have no subclass synergy. The only thing you're going to lose out on is making tangles. But I think the gun is so good in its strand form already that I would just rather have the catalyst. Now, the number one piece of advice I can give for this gun, besides just monitoring how many grenades you have, is to manually reload your grenade shots instead of waiting for the game to do it. When you shoot a grenade, you need to load a new one in, but if you mash the reload button right as you shoot, you will trigger the reload animation faster than if you just let the game do it for you. This is going to allow you to be ready a little faster and put out more total damage with no penalties at all, but it does require a little bit more effort on your part. Did I mention that the grenades you shoot out of this gun don't even hurt you? Unlike other grenade weapons, you don't even need to worry about exploding yourself. If you own Lightfall, which I imagine a very large portion of you do, then you own this weapon. And even without artifact perks, this weapon is phenomenal. It is great in all modes of play, casual, solo, group, endgame, GMs, dungeon, I don't care what you bring it into, because this gun is outstanding. This is a plea to people, to you, to use this gun, not only because it is so good, But because your typical legendary primary is just not really cutting it anymore. Legendary primary weapon performance, as of late, especially very recently, has felt weak. And I do think that this is a contributing factor to some people's struggles in the game today, is that you just don't know what the meta is. As much as people may want to play with their favorite loadouts, when it comes to endgame content, you do need to make some adjustments, and one adjustment I feel some people should probably be making is switching to an exotic primary for the time being. Right now, I would say that if I'm not using Quicksilver Storm as my primary weapon, I'm using an SMG or a trace rifle as my primary, unless I absolutely need to use something else for champion purposes. SMGs right now feel like the strongest primary because of their killing power, and because there are a lot of SMGs out there that can roll with really good perks, specifically subclass related perks. Trace rifles have seen a boost in popularity, mostly thanks to a lot of primary weapons feeling super bad, but also because of the continued dominance of the double special loadout. Bungie has claimed to have nerfed the amount of power ammo that drops from this loadout quite a while ago, but I have not really seen that reflected in-game, most notably in the solo dungeon experience. Comparatively, I tried using age-old Bond for a video recently, and it just feels like it hits like a wet noodle. Although I have zero math behind any of this, it's just purely feeling. I wasn't using any perks that boost the gun's performance though, they were perks that boosted my subclass build, so that was kind of the trade-off I was making, but it just didn't even really feel like that good of one. Higher RPM scouts still feel okay, bows are still quite strong in endgame, although I still recommend the exotics. But outside of that, I mean, Quicksilver, a wave frame, and a machine gun have been getting it done for 2 seasons straight. Zero incentive to switch off of it right now, and I'm historically someone who likes to change things up. I'm guessing I'll start to get tired of it in another season, but when I get to wield 4 weapons at the same time instead of 3, with one of them being an unlimited ammo grenade launcher, I'm not in a really big hurry to switch. A lot of people will go back to the Shadowkeep days as the ground zero for primary weapons feeling worse thanks to some nerfs that we received as a result of the game back then. That nerf was that red bar enemies took extra crit damage, 2x crit damage to their precision hit location versus enemies of higher ranks. However, Bungie has said that we're almost back to those pre-nerf days, at least with regards to hand cannons, but despite all of that, they still don't feel good enough, and Bungie is dropping another massive buff for hand cannons at some point in the future. 20% more damage versus red bars, and 75% versus orange bars. All other weapons? Well, let's just say my most common PvE loadouts for the past 4 months have included a Stasis Fusion, Conditional Finality, any good elemental SMG, trace rifles, any good machine gun at all, and exotic primary weapons. Given the performance of legendary weapons, it is probably time for Bungie to provide a little more juice to them or close the gap between exotics and legendaries in terms of their power difference. You don't really feel the effects of the weakness of primary weapons when you're using an exotic one because of their massive damage advantage, which is why Quicksilver has been glued to my hands. You combine that big exotic primary bonus with the efficiency of both a wave frame and a machine gun, you're just gonna annihilate everything. Of course, the person using a random legendary hand cannon is out here struggling, or a random legendary auto rifle. You're not maximizing your damage output. But it's not really fair to have to tell people to just deal with it because the game isn't about being 100% optimized all of the time. I realized that Bungie wanted to provide a really strong reason to use exotic primaries since they weren't getting used for a while. Now we kind of have the opposite problem. Part of the issue as well is how much we've power crept basic legendary weapons. Our subclasses are jacked up beyond belief. We have artifact perks to boost us even further beyond, not to mention perks that synergize with our subclasses far more than ever before. Season 21 has 5 arc mods. You really think I'm going to break out a Chroma Rush? The days of Outlaw Rampage are gone. The days of our weapons being the bulk of our killing power or our damage are gone, at least in terms of primary weapons, and at least for now anyway. It's still totally possible to have gun-based builds, but they tend to be really specific and really focused on subclass effects. Cold Heart build, Collective Obligation build, Agar Scepter, Osteostriga. They're built with a lot of subclass effects in mind or other things that boost you in mind. Bungie has pushed build crafting tremendously over the past year and a half as a way of providing more dimension to the game, but a Fatebringer with some decent aim is just not really going to cut it anymore. But should it be enough? Should it be allowed to be enough? Because sure, if you're using a fully optimized kit, you're going to be fine, but if you're not, it can feel like a slog trying to do some of the things in the game. Bungie has said that they're trying to dump more stasis and strand weapons into the kinetic slot to try to equalize things and ensure that those subclasses have options. Good news is that they do have something planned for kinetics to try to make them more enticing, but the bad news is that it's going to be in the final shape era of the game. So if the problem does eventually get fixed, which I don't think it will be completely, we're going to have to wait a while. So to those of you who might be struggling in solo content, Legend, Master Lost Sectors, or whatever you might be struggling with, it may not actually be a skill issue. You could just have really weak guns on. Turns out, a legendary auto rifle, a legendary bow with a grenade launcher, not exactly a meta build, and I don't care how fun you think it is, the other two people in your team aren't really cheering you on right now. If you're struggling, I'd really suggest swapping off of legendary primary weapons and going to exotic ones for the time being. And if you are going to stick on legendaries, I would stick with SMGs, I would stick with trace rifles at this moment in time. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.